Hi everybody, this is Mark Brower with another video where I'm answering your questions about spiritual issues and how they relate to our mental health, mental well-being, particularly when it comes to challenges like addiction, depression, and anxiety. Right now I'm walking near a river in our area. It's kind of like a park preserve area right near our home. And we're in drought conditions, so if you don't see any river behind me, it's because the river's dried up, but the path is still here. So anyway, here's the question today. It's a follow-up to what we were talking about, or what I talked about in the video last week, which is, why is it that you say that sometimes Christians can have more struggles, can have extra challenges in recovery? And I think that this idea of Christians having unique challenges is true when it comes to Christians dealing with addiction. I don't have as much experience in the treatment part, but as a pastor and working with people, I kind of have a sense that what I'm saying here that applies to addiction might also be true and probably also applies to the work of recovery, healing from depression and anxiety and some of the other mental health challenges. But it certainly, I see this with addiction recovery, and I talk about it in the workshops that I teach about recovery from addiction. So last week's video, I talked about two things that I saw or that I see. One of those is that Christians sometimes have a harder time with recovery because the shame that they feel an added layer of shame about their behavior, about their struggle, and so they need to work extra hard to be honest and open and get the help they need. And then also the second thing I talked about is the fact that Christians seem to assume that their spiritual life is intact if they have the right beliefs. And if they've grown up in a church, they sort of assume that what the 12 steps talk about with the spiritual awakening that's required for recovery, that they sort of got that figured out, that they shouldn't be having these struggles. And let's say with other other issues of mental health like anxiety or depression, maybe sometimes people would feel like, well, I shouldn't be having this because I believe this about God, and I have this background and knowledge and awareness and a faith in my life that should keep me from having this. Well, it's not working. Therefore, we need to take a look at some of the beliefs that we have and ask ourselves, is this something that is really true and really working in my life, or is it really like a belief that I aspire to, or a faith group that I'm a part of, but the reality isn't actually working well in my own life? Anyway, talked about that last week, and I invite you to look at that video to find out more about that if you haven't already. Here's what I want to talk about today, and I'm going to call this the third issue that Christian people can struggle with. And it's the challenge or the problem that we fall into of magical thinking. And there's a difference between having a genuine faith, trust that God is going to help you and can help you deal with the problem. Between that and, I'm just going to call it magical thinking. And the difference is, with magical thinking is where we have this desire and a commitment and a practice that where we take a problem that we have and we turn it over to God, and then we just assume that God's going to fix it and that we don't need to do anything. In fact, there's a saying, kind of goes back to a historical movement where the saying emerged that I need to let go and let God. And so if I have a challenge or a problem in my life, I need to turn that over to God. So far, so good. And we take the challenges that we have and we pray about them, recognizing that there's a lot of things that we can't do anything about, so we turn that stuff over to God. But what does it mean to then let God? I just let go and let God. I think for some people, And I would have to say, I'll just admit that in my life, there's a certain period of time in my life where the struggles in my life, I was trying to do that. I would just say, well, what I need to do is just really just trust God, just give it over to God. And I wouldn't have said it in these terms. I probably would have been offended to think of it in these terms, but it was basically just magical thinking, just magically assuming that if I can do that, then God's just going to fix it. So here's the principle that we need to keep in mind that I think helps us overcome magical thinking. God will do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. That's the first part of it. God will do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. And in fact, that is like a basic tenet of Christianity. It's sort of the essence of our faith structure, to believe that we can't save ourselves and we need to look to God, and specifically the teaching and the work of Jesus Christ to save us, to bring salvation to us, that we can't provide that. And so many things in life, there are things that we are unable to deal with, problems we're unable to solve. We can't fix this, and so we give it to God and trust that God will do those things for us that we can't do for ourselves. Okay. There's a flip side to that coin. The underneath is that God will not do for us what we can do for ourselves. In other words, if there are things that we do have the power to do, that it would be unloving of God, it would be unhelpful for God to just do those things for us. Now, anyone who's a parent gets this instinctively, right? Because part of the parenting journey and part of how to be a wise parent is, as your kids grow, you realize that you have to stop doing the things that you did for them as they are growing and growing and able to take on more things for themselves. We need to let them. And so for us as parents to continue to just do stuff for our kids is disempowering. It is damaging to them. So like if I said, hey, I'm a great parent, I love my kids are awesome, and I'm a great dad. I'm such a great dad that I tie my kids' shoes every morning. That's awesome. Until you find out that my kids are in their 20s, right? That would be a problem. I mean, it would be either I would be a really bad dad, or they would have real problems themselves, and maybe both. A good father is someone who trains his kids, helps his kids, provides safe structure for his kids, and helps them so that as they develop, that they are able to do those things that they have the capacity to do. That's part of growing up. And that's how God, I believe, and the scriptures certainly teach, that's how God relates to us. And so one of the issues of discernment in the process of recovery or healing or just general life itself is like, what is it that I have no control over? What is it that I'm powerless to deal with? And that is what I turn over to God. But then what is it that I am able to influence? What power do I have? And that is what I need to take responsibility for and to take action on. And if I simply turn my problems over to God and pray for God to fix my addiction, fix this challenge or whatever, and I'm not doing the things that I'm capable of doing and called to do, that's just magical thinking. So the way this works with recovery from addiction is there's a lot of things that are outside of my ability to control that I pray about. And when it comes to anxiety, a big part of how I deal with that in the spiritual realm or in the spiritual dimension of life is that as I learn what I can and cannot control and the things that I cannot control, I turn those over to God and develop a trust over time that those things that God does help with those things, right? But then I'm also having to acknowledge that God isn't going to just magically wake me up in the morning and give me time to have devotional, scripture reading, time to meditate and pray. God isn't going to magically teleport me to recovery meetings. God isn't going to just magically open up my soul to connect to other people. All of those things I need to make room for. I need to have the discipline or take the initiative to set up that time for me to have the time to connect with God. I need to put in place in my life connections with other people, and I need to have the vulnerability to be honest and open with people about what's happening in my life, rather than simply just saying, God, I want you to fix this problem, but I don't want to have to do anything about it. I don't want to have to change anything. See, a lot of people, again, this is going to relate to the whole issue of shame and hiding as Christians. Some of us as Christians, we have this idea like, okay, I have this problem, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this deal with God. So the deal is, God, I'm going to pray to you about this. I'm going to trust you to help me. I'm going to turn this thing over to you, okay? And God, then, and you're going to, and you can fix it. You take care of it, and then let's just keep this between us, you and me, God. I don't want to have to tell anybody. I don't want to have to get honest with people who might, judge me. I don't. Let's just keep it between us, and you take care of this. Well, it doesn't work that way. We have a word for people who do that. We call them relapsers because they never can stay sober. They can never recover because there's challenges that we need to take effort at. We need to exert ourselves to take these steps, and trusting that God's going to somehow help us and fix our problems when we aren't taking the steps ourselves. That is not faith. That's magical thinking. All right, so I hope that's helpful. I want to invite you, if you have any further comments or questions, to write those in the chat box, or else send me an email. And also then send me an email if you have other questions that you'd like me to address in other videos. If you've not done so already, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. There'll be more teaching about dealing with addiction and recovery, but also mental health challenges like stress and overwhelm, anxiety, depression, and especially how then our spiritual life can help us with those things. So have a great week. We'll be in touch.